Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Once again, I'm bringing back this wonderful book, Strange Monsters and Great Searches by George Laycock. I had done chapter 7 a couple of months back, like somewhere around July or so of this year, and so now I'm bringing this book back, focusing on chapter 8, which has to do with an interesting title that's called Feathered Monsters. But the title and the actual chapter actually describe a real-life animal that used to exist very recently within this world, but then it became extinct. In fact, there's a famous phrase associated with it when you hear something along the lines of, "It went the way of the dodo." That's essentially what this chapter is about. It's about this beautiful creature that used to exist for who knows how long, but then through circumstances just ended up becoming extinct. But who knows, there could still be some out there in this world, and it always highlights how cryptids could be the same. Long lost cryptids that people think are gone could come back someday and just suddenly be found out there in this world. So without further ado, let's go ahead. I'll share this chapter here. I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it afterward. Let me know what you guys and gals think about this chapter as well. It's a little bit on the shorter side, but as always, I'll chronicle it here within my playlist. So here's what it says. Wherever early explorers traveled, they discovered creatures new and strange. Sometimes these wild beasts and birds were so different that they were scarcely believable. Consider, for example, the dodo. The first Europeans to find them were Portuguese sailors who came to the island of Mauritius in 1507. They are believed to have returned several times through the years. Then in 1598, Commander Jacob van Neck cruised along the shores of this island east of Madagascar. There were no Europeans living here, nor, for that matter, on the two neighboring islands. The commander dropped anchor and went ashore to explore. Deep forest shaded much of the island. Whatever else they found on this island, the strangest creature of all was a remarkable bird that looked as if it had been designed by a prankster playing a joke on naturalists. The bird weighed about 50 pounds. It stood on short yellow legs and had a somewhat round-shaped body. Its wings were small. They would not begin to lift that great weight from the ground. Its tiny tail was a curled plume standing up like a little feather duster. The bird's head was dominated by its bill, 9 inches long, thick, and then hooked on the end. Unlike the crow or jay, this bird seemed slow-witted, not very bright at all. This shortcoming was hidden behind a comical look on its face. Apparently, however, this bird had no need for brilliance any more than it had a reason to fly. It faced no natural enemies of consequence. So what did it matter if it stumbled clumsily and then toppled over itself when running through the forest? Neither did it matter if its low-hanging undercarriage dragged along the ground. Some believe the big clumsy bird was named because of its call. Sailors who first discovered it claimed that it said dodo. Wherever people encounter wild creatures, they have a tendency to ask immediately what good such animals might be to people. This test was at once applied to the dodo. For all of its strange design, the bird was larger than a swan and looked to its discoverers like a lot of fresh meat packed into one bird. The dodo bird proved extremely easy to kill, an advantage to sailors, but not to the dodos. All a dodo hunter had to do was stay out of reach of that stout bill while striking the bird a fatal blow on the back of its head with a club. For the first time in its recent history, the big bird had met an enemy capable of coping with a dodo. Back on ship with the dead birds, the crew waited while the cook stewed the prize. Each of the birds was 3 times as heavy as a turkey. Only a few would be needed to feed the entire crew. The dodo, which had proved easy to kill, however, was far more difficult to chew. According to Commander Van Neck's writings, the longer it had simmered in the pot, the tougher it seemed to be. Whether this is to be blamed more on the dodo than the cook, no one will ever know, because both have now been gone for a few hundred years. Later, however, others who cooked dodos claimed that their flesh tended to be tasty and tender. It is said that once a year these birds produced a single white egg and incubated it on a platform of grass. Likewise, it is said that the dodo used the wings, which were no good for flying, for fighting instead. As they rushed upon each other, the pounding of their wings against the flesh of their neighbors resounded through the forest like claps of thunder. One species is said to have been equipped with a ball-like bone on each wing and to have used these as a kind of a war club during territorial struggles with others of its kind. Quite likely, people back in Europe would not have believed the commander as he described the dodo bird he had discovered. There was but one answer. He must carry one back, then no one could scoff. So Commander Van Neck proudly escorted the first dodo ashore in Europe in 1599. The ponderous bird, fat and unbelievable, soon became a favorite wherever it was displayed. In the following years, others were taken to zoos in Europe. Meanwhile, artists of the day, seeking fresh subject matter, painted the dodo in numerous pictures. As events turned out, it is good that they did. Mauritius, where the dodo was first seen by man, lies off the coast of Madagascar. In addition, there is the nearby Reunion Island, which had a dodo of its own, and Rodriguez Island, which had another dodo-like occupant called the solitaire. They were discovered about the same time and were all then in line for the same fate. Less than a half century after its first discovery, the dodo of Mauritius was in serious trouble. In 1644, Holland sent colonists to establish homes and farms on Mauritius, went for them with hogs, dogs, cats, and people, all of which would consume dodos and their young or eggs. Hogs are especially destructive to ground-nesting birds, and free-running dogs must have worried, chased, and killed the stumbling dodos. Then the dodo was gone from Mauritius. It is believed to have become extinct around 1681. Then soon it was also extinct on the neighboring island of Reunion. It may have persisted a while longer on Rodriguez, but the solitaires there were soon gone too, as dead as a dodo. True, the dodo, dumb and ugly, never did have a lot going for it. It just went quietly about its island world, doing whatever dodos went about quietly doing. When it was gone, there was little evidence that it ever existed except in the pictures artists had painted in Europe. As for mounted specimens, there was known to be only one. It was in a private collection and was eventually transferred to the collection of a museum in Oxford, England. There, when the staff was cleaning up the place one day, someone noticed the old stuffed dodo. What a ratty-looking specimen it was. The feathers were broken, rough, and out of place. Its general rundown appearance was enough to make a tidy museum staff feel shame and chagrin. The staff looked at the tattered remnant, and the museum director made his decision: take the bird out and dispose of it. So the last of the dodos was banished. But before it was fed into the flames, the head and one leg, still in pretty good shape, were taken off and saved. New evidence of what the dodo looked like came to light in the depths of a muddy swamp, Mauritius, in 1865. That year, a collection of dodo birds was found preserved in the mud. From these spare parts, museum workers assembled skeletons of the bird. These became the foundations for restorations or man-made dodos. Today, you may see in a museum what appears to be a preserved dodo, but it will only be the work of a clever taxidermist who has assembled a counterfeit model of one of the most remarkable big birds the world has ever known. As big as it was, the 50-pound dodo was a bit of a smaller bird compared with another bird known to have lived on the island of Madagascar. Scientists studying bones and fossils have given this towering creature its name, Aperonis maximus. It has also been called the elephant bird. From what we know about Maximus, it seems safe to say that this was the largest bird ever to have walked the earth. A distant cousin of the ostrich and emu, the elephant bird is believed to have weighed half a ton. It stood on legs as thick as tree trunks and had a kick sufficient to drop a bull dead in its tracks. To be kicked to death by a bird would seem an ignoble way for a bull to depart. Remarkable indeed was the egg of the elephant bird. It had a shell about as thick as a silver dollar and was so big it was used to hold water around the homes of native people. It was used to hold water around the homes of native people living on the island. It would hold more than a gallon of liquid. Aperonis maximus could have been forgiven for taking pride in such a magnificent egg. Scientific interest in the bird ran high in the early 1600s. Naturalists believed that they might yet find some alive. The French government appointed a governor of Madagascar who was an observant naturalist interested in the remarkable world around him. Eventually, he wrote a book of his experiences. In those pages, he mentioned the bird with eggs so large they were used as water jugs and added that he himself had seen such eggs. But a series of unfortunate events was to cut the story short. First, when the governor was on his way back to France, where naturalists might have asked him more about the elephant birds, he encountered a gang of pirates. They killed him. Gradually, the elephant bird slipped from conversation, memory, and scientific concern. 200 years passed, and then the story was revived. Traveling naturalists once more began to hear reports of the remarkable giant birds in the interior of Madagascar. As interest mounted, efforts were made to collect the eggs and then bring them out to civilization where the light of the science might shine upon them. But only one such egg was known to have been collected. It was on its way back to France when the ship transporting it sailed into a massive storm. The ship crashed upon the shoals, sank from the sight beneath the waves, egg and all. Then in 1848, a trader heard again of the giant birds and was told that deep in the inland portions of the island, they still survive, but they have never ever been seen by scientists to this day. The last of the elephant birds is doubtless gone. With it went the last of a legendary species, the biggest birds that ever lived. There remains much that we shall never know about this feathered monster. Then that's it. That's everything associated with this chapter, Chapter 8, Feathered Monsters. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that. By the way, I might have been misspoken from before, thinking that the dodo only recently passed away or gone extinct. Maybe I was having a Mandela moment, but I could have sworn as a kid, remember reading stories about dodos and how they were still, like sometime in the 1900s, still about, but I guess I'm wrong on that one because, yeah, apparently this bird, this poor, fateful, tragic bird was found on those islands of Madagascar, Mauritius, and so on. And whenever it was discovered, it was pretty much marked from there. You remember that saying, right? Going the way of the dodo. Well, that's essentially where it comes from. This tragic bird, once it was discovered, it was basically eaten by humans. And right, it looks like in this case, it was because there was no other enemies that the dodo bird had within that location. It was basically by itself up to the point of humans coming aboard. So it could exist as is. Evolution made it that way. Like it made it in terms of it almost being clumsy, not too bright, apparently, with its actions, not being able to fly, not really having much appendages to be able to fight with as well. It just didn't have those attributes because nature didn't deem it needed it. But here comes some humans, and then it was too little, too late. So here you have a situation where the dodo bird went essentially the way of the dodo, and in less than 50 years or so, it was almost all but extinct. Tragic to think that, especially when it comes to a situation like this, where this dodo bird would have otherwise lived who knows how many generations of families happily as is. And then to hear that some of the last remnants of a dodo bird were basically thrown out of a museum as well, just because of the way it looked, I guess its condition at that point. That was truly it. That was the last of it. But I still hold the opinion that just like with the other feathered monster associated with this chapter, that so-called elephant bird, that there could be a chance that there's still something out there, that there's still something in some pocket of forestry unknown to man, maybe in some caves, who knows, just a location that just hasn't been discovered yet, that you'll find these wonderful creatures. And if so, then that'll be a great chance for this dodo to basically come back from extinction, be considered part of the endangered species list, and then be able to come back as a species afterward. Just my thoughts on there, but let me know what you guys and gals think. Madagascar once again comes forward with another set of cryptids. I've talked about that before in other videos as well, how there's a multitude of cryptids that are found there just because of its unique location. It seems like definitely nature and evolution ended up creating a lot of wonderful creatures there. But otherwise, that's it. Let me know what you guys and gals think. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.